And now, Superhuman Shaq.
I keep telling them not to say that. I'm no superhuman. Believe it or not, I struggle with moderate obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA. In adults with obesity, moderate to severe OSA is a condition where breathing is interrupted during sleep with loud snoring, choking, gasping for air, and even daytime fatigue. Let's just say it can sound a lot like this. Sound familiar? Learn more at don'tsleeponosa.com.
This information is provided by Lilly, a medicine company.
With so many options out there, recovering from a workout can start to feel like its own workout. At Anytime Fitness, we use your body composition scan to make a smarter recovery plan, one made for you. So stop guessing and join Anytime Fitness today.
A warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Greg Oops Peterson, now part of the Big XII Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Unfortunately, we do not have any games today because, well, it is Christmas Day, and I've done this on the podcast the last few years. Typically, we have, at the very least, a Time Night Classic going on, so I split it up into two parts. I did an interview with Ryan McIntyre, our good friend Moneyline_Mac, M-A-C, on the old Twitter/X. He's going to join me in segment number 2. Have no fear, I record this the day before Christmas Eve. I did not want to make anyone do any interviews on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day because, well, I believe that's all about family this time of year, and I want to go to work so that way you guys don't have to, and I still want to give you guys something entertaining, whether you're driving along to, like, Grandma and Grandpa's house, maybe you're hosting Christmas yourself, you're getting everything all set. Let me go to work so that nobody else does, but I just want to give you guys a little bit more of an entertaining podcast today. I mean, I talk a lot of hardcore college basketball on this podcast, and it's always a lot of fun, but I don't think a lot of you guys get my personal backstory. I like to tell it once a year. How I got into sports betting, how I am where I am right now, because I do get questions from you guys on the old Twitter/X at unit_81, aspiring college students, people just looking to be able to chase their dreams, what have you. Hey, how do you get into media? How do you get into sports betting? What have you. I like to take this podcast to be able to just tell my personal story, give a little bit of pointers, tell you exactly why I've got the spray the board style, because a lot of people think that, oh, the video picks and the write-ups, those are the only things I bet. No, I'm betting every sinking game on the board. I'm going to have hundreds and hundreds of bets on these Saturdays when it comes to conference play. I am very much a man that will play an advantage, whether it's a 1-point advantage on my line or a 20-point advantage. So I'm going to tell you how I got into that, how I got that style, why I am where I am right now, and then we'll talk with Ryan McIntyre, who does great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, a little bit about the Big 12, a little bit about how he's going to be attacking conference play as well. That'll be coming up in segment number 2. So a fun podcast here. If you've got a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Lars EM, the does not matter. So per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions. Everything is powered by Better. That is BETR on Better, who's making it all the better to be able to dive in on some daily fantasy, because as a listener to this fine podcast, all you need to do is go to BETR.app, type in the promo code of VSIMPOD, that is VSIMPOD. That gets you $10 free to be able to get all started. So we've got ourselves that going on, and also with Better, if you're in a jurisdiction in which you've got money lines and spreads, you're able to bet on those as well. But that said, in terms of the Christmas story that I always like to tell, how I got into sports betting, I've always been very passionate about sports, but I knew that I was never going to be able to make it with regards to sports. I was growing up in the great state of Wisconsin. I'm a former Hortonville Polar Bear. For all of you guys that are out there in Wisconsin, went to college over at UW-Oshkosh. I'll dive into that in a minute, but I was growing up. I played football, basketball, and baseball, and I retired from all three by the end of my freshman year of high school due to a lack of talent. I really was not great. Like, I was a 215-pound blob that bench pressed like 100 pounds. Like, I was not very built in high school, to say the least. Not an Adonis, not someone who was going to be throwing a football, blocking, doing anything. Like, when it came to basketball, I was the guy that would be out there for 10 minutes, 5 fouls, and 0 points. I was a solid free throw shooter, but I could never get to the free throw line. So I knew that was not going to be a route for me, but I loved bracketology. It all started, my love of bracketology, during the 2005 NCAA tournament. My mom wanted me to fill out her bracket. I was only 12 years old at the time. You had to be 13 or older to apply for prizes. I decided, hey, let's fill this thing out. I didn't know a ton about college basketball. I was a little bit more of an NBA guy. Like, I was heartbroken when the Milwaukee Bucks had that Eastern Conference final completely stolen away from them by the referees, by the Philadelphia 76ers back in the day. I was much more of an NBA guy at first, but I figured, hey, why not? Let's fill out this bracket. I saw that Wisconsin in round number 2 was probably going to need to face off against Kansas, and thus if this 14th seed by the name of Bucknell knocked them off. And I thought, oh, you know what? It would be great if Wisconsin faced off against Bucknell. I advanced Bucknell. I decided, hey, let's take a few other upsets. Vermont, why not have them knock off Syracuse? That sounds good to me. I had Wisconsin losing in the Elite Eight, which actually happened. That turned out to be a top 50 bracket, which that was very impressive. I was like, hey, maybe I know a little bit of something about this basketball stuff, even though I had never seen a game for Vermont, Bucknell, or a lot of these teams in my life. And I decided, hey, Joel Lenardi, this guy's really cool. He's doing like all this bracket stuff and everything like that. I should do my own bracketology. So there I am in like 7th and 8th grade. I'm doing like bracketology printouts and everything like that. And it's a year that in 2006 you had Glenn Big Baby Davis at LSU make it to the Final Four. A bunch of chaos. George Mason, they made their run into the Final Four, and I thought, oh, this is absolutely awesome. And I got into it, and that's a big reason why I do have a lot of balance when it comes to college basketball, because when it comes to scoring bracketology for like the bracket matrix, for all people that follow bracketology, you get the same amount of points for picking the 16 seed correct as you do the 1 seed. And that's a little bit of the antithesis of what you get on this podcast, because you're able to make money in some poop-tastic game in the Southland the same way that you're able to in Duke versus North Carolina. Granted, your limits are going to be a little bit higher in Duke versus North Carolina versus, oh, I don't know, the Citadel versus Northwestern State or some funny dud game or something like that. But money is money, and it all is able to be spent the same. So that's a big reason why I do have sort of the style that I do. And I was going through high school. I always wanted to go to like Northwestern, Syracuse, one of those great broadcast schools. Let's call it what it is. I'm a slacker. I was watching college basketball instead of actually doing a great job of getting grades. So I go to the State University of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, which, shout out to UW-Oshkosh, greatest university of all time. They gave me a chance to get on the air day number 1, doing some radio, doing some TV, a little bit of everything. Great professors over there. It's a really, really good college. If you're out there considering a college, I would highly recommend UW-Oshkosh, to say the least. Hail Titans. But you know what? My senior year of college comes about, and the UW-Oshkosh Titans had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They were playing against South Dakota State. They took the game at the last minute. It's a bye game. South Dakota State in football, they just needed to find some opponent, and for UW-Oshkosh, they stepped up. They took the check, and something for those of you guys that know about South Dakota State athletics, known as the Beef Bowl every year, where they're literally selling cattle at halftime. So good, clean family fun right there for those that aren't familiar with South Dakota State. But yeah, I was thinking to myself, all right, UW-Oshkosh is playing against South Dakota State. This is their first time playing against a Division I team in about 30 plus years. I should see if there's a betting line on this game. Just how big of an underdog do they have my university, UW-Oshkosh, as? Obviously, most of the notable books did not, but for those that remember this website of the day 5 times, I was stunned when I saw that there was a line on this game. And guess what the line was? UW-Oshkosh was catching 45 points as an underdog, and just knowing the situation that UW-Oshkosh took this game at the very last minute, they were doing South Dakota State a very big solid, so that way they could have their Beef Bowl game. I thought, you know what, South Dakota State is going to show a little bit of mercy, and the year before, UW-Oshkosh made the Final Four of the Division III college football playoff as well, so I thought, hey, let's place our first ever bet. I had never placed a bet before in my life. Frankly, I had never followed betting up until then. I was was just really curious on that, and I thought, hey, you know what? Because it was a minus 120 straddle that I had to pay on that one, probably because it was a D3 versus a D1 game, and let's call it what it is. Even in this day and age, you're not going to find too many lines on insert your favorite non-Division I school versus Division I school here, but before I could lock in the bet, I was told, hey, the line is moved. Instead of catching 45 points with UW Oshkosh, I was catching 46.5 points. I took it. I placed $60 to win 50. UW Oshkosh loses the game 35-3. Probably should have retired right there because that would have meant that I would have won out 1-0, but I thought, hey, this is interesting. So I get done with college. I spend a year over in Nashville, Tennessee, where I was... Let's call it what it is. If you're in media, typically you're struggling your first year out of college. I was betting some college basketball games over there on 5 Dimes. That was back when UT Arlington had Kevin Hervey. That really became my team that I was betting on, and it was very volatile. I was betting more money than I probably should have because I really needed to pay my rent. I was working pretty much on sales, and I'm not the world's greatest salesman, so that was not amazing to say the least, but the college basketball picks, they were paying for a little bit more, and I still have my biggest regret of all time. I'll take you back to like early 2016, 2017. I really needed to pay my rent that month. I would typically be able to get the money via MoneyGram and everything like that. I had already withdrawn once, so I had to pay a little bit of a fee to be able to cash out on this one, and I had the option that I could have gotten the $1,200 in the form of Bitcoin instead. And that would have been at the time like 5.5 to 6 full Bitcoins. Boy, do I wish I cashed out that way and had not cashed out in actual cash. I recognize that Bitcoin has had a rough last few weeks, but man, I would not be having to really do a whole lot of anything. I would be very, very much set if I were to have done that, but you know what? I'm sure that we all have our regrets. That is certainly one of mine, but it was very volatile. I was paying for rent, but I had lost a few games. I had put a little bit too much on as well. So in the end, I was able to make a little bit of money, but I was a little bit hurting. I then decided, you know what? I need to find something a little bit more stable. I go on over to Portland, Oregon for a year. I was working for the home of the Oregon Ducks. And by the way, when I was in Nashville, Tennessee for a year, I was working weekends for the official flagship station of the Vanderbilt Commodores. So if you ever notice me pointing out those schools a little bit more, that's a reason why. But while I was in Oregon, I met someone who had ties to lovely Las Vegas. I was only part-time in Portland as well, so I was living in a studio-style apartment. I was barely getting by in Portland as well, and he had told me, hey, there's this new startup that I'm going to be joining. I'm going to be leaving this place, and I'm going to be heading back to Las Vegas. It's called the Vegas Stats and Information Network. And I thought to myself, man, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get a little bit more stability? I always wanted to be on air, and I was doing a podcast over there with, at the time, 102.9 750 The Game in Portland. Shout out to you guys, very, very good people over there. But I decided, hey, I need to get something a little bit more stable, even if I'm going to be off air a little bit more. I didn't even know that I was going to be able to get a job over at VSiN. It was all very strange. It was a little bit murky because VSiN had just started up at the time. We had just hired on our COO. I will mention his name, Bill 80. He had just joined the company like weeks earlier. I don't think that he was there day number 1, but he had joined very, very super duper early. Much like myself, they were getting everything all in line. So I didn't even know if I had a job or not. They just told me, hey, show up. And I didn't know what I was getting paid the first few weeks or anything like that. But I was starting to be able to get some consistency. I had hours, but I was working out fair. I was doing a lot of cutting up audio, looking at video, posting up things to social media on the official VSiN Twitter/X feed and everything like that. And a lot of people I have been talking to over at VSiN, I will mention their names, Ron Flatter, Matt Humans, very, very good guys. They notice, hey, this guy knows a lot about college basketball. Maybe we should give him a few spots. And so did the producers as well. This was, year number 1. I was getting a few opportunities on air, which was great, and I was doing a little bit of producing for the man himself, Brent Musburger, which is still one of the greatest privileges I've ever had in my life. And he got a little bit annoyed because when I would put together the show's rundown for what was known at the time as My Guys in the Desert, I would always try to sneak in there some college basketball. Brent was always telling me, football's king, we need to do more football, and there's me trying to sneak in some funny dog game between Northern Iowa Iowa and North Carolina, I remember, was a big one for mine in like mid-November or something like that. And he just decided to call me Hoops instead because he's like, you're just always talking about college basketball. Lo and behold, I'm getting more and more opportunities at the network. And then I was able to do a little bit of podcasting on my own as well, because at the time I wasn't necessarily getting a ton of run over at VSiN. I was getting a little bit for college basketball, but not much else. And I was able to get a very good opportunity with another man that I'll mention, Steve Heitner, Rich Johnson, very, very good guys. They had started up a little bit of a podcast called That's Gold. And while I was working with them, I was one of the sidekicks on that show. I was able to start up my own podcast, which actually this is a podcast that did not start out with VSiN. This was actually my own independent venture that VSiN would actually take in a few years later, because I just stuck in a lot of time. As you guys know, this is a podcast that has not taken a day off since day number 1 of the 2019 college basketball season. So we're on over 2,100 straight days, and I will throw out there this statistic here as well. There have been more pandemics that have happened in the world and the United States than we have had days without a missed podcast this decade. So that's a point of honor, in my opinion, and I've just been grinding out this podcast. Obviously, COVID hit and everything was just in a bunch of disarray. Just kept on doing this podcast. Obviously, the baseball betting show, VSiN, was very interested in it, so they decided to take it back in. I was able to do the Greg Peterson Experience for a few years, which still obviously do miss that show. You don't know how much. That was just such a greatest privilege of my life. But I mean, there are so many ups and downs. I've been able to find my footing here in sports betting, and just along the way, I found out a little bit more about myself, because back when I moved out here in lovely Las Vegas in 2018, I was very much one of those guys that would put too much money on a few specific games. That was me in Nashville, Tennessee, when I was trying to be able to pay off my rent and trying to be able to get through with the student loans as well. And then I realized, wow, my real edge is just taking a look at the entire board, because when I were to be able to place just a few select bets on the betting board, for those that follow me on the old Twitter /X at GN_1, you have to be a longtime follower to remember like the 2018, 2019 years, but I was a guy that would only do a specific like bets. I would have a play of the day and everything like that. Never worked out. Like if I had 5 games that I bet, they would go 2 and 3, and then the 5 games that were the next 5 on the board would go like 4 and 1, and then I would add it to 10 games, and then those games would go like 5 and 5, and maybe the next 10 bets would go like 7 and 3. I just kept noticing this, that my edges, in terms of having just smaller edges, they hit pretty much the same as my larger edges. That's a big reason why I do have the style that I do. It all goes back to being a guy that does a lot of bracketology, paying the same amount of attention to say the Southland, the Northeast Conference, as I do the ACC, the Big Ten, and that's sort of how I was able to find my style. And I think that that's very important. Always be experimenting, always be just looking at what is your forte. Like for some people, their forte is picking 1 game a day, just looking at the betting board, ignoring all the noise of the other games, and just honing in on that one spot. For me, that is just not me. I am an action junkie. I am someone that I am looking at all things college basketball, always have, always will, and I don't dive into a lot of sports. Like, you'll notice that if you try to ask me for like some hockey picks, I know that someone was trying to ask me about the Jake Paul fight a few days ago. I've got absolutely nothing with regards to the Jake Paul fight. I couldn't tell you anything that's happened in the NHL this season. I follow some football. I'm a guy that grew up 45 minutes away from Green Bay, so in my blood, I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, so I can give you a little bit of a survivor's amount of the NFL. I have not been doing too bad in the NFL this year. I've done a few video picks, especially when we were having a little bit of a lull between baseball and college basketball, but I think that that's the biggest thing for me as well. And for anyone that is looking to get into sports media, for anyone that's looking to get into sports betting, just say yes to opportunity. That's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to any of you guys. Say yes to opportunity. Be open to any sort of opportunity as well. You never know when doors are going to be opening. Like the way that I was able to get this podcast, I didn't place a job application or anything like that. It just pretty much came to me. When I was working over in Portland, Oregon, I did not fill out an application for the Vegas Statute Information Network. I was just friendly to people around the building. I got to know their name and just shook some hands, just tried to always be upbeat, even when things maybe aren't going your way, maybe when you're questioning, hey, is this ever going to be able to break through? Just keep on grinding. And that's sort of the big thing that I try to show you with doing this podcast every single day. Even if it's a dead day like today where we've got no games, just sticking with it, just being able to put out some consistent content, that is big, and people will reward consistency. Maybe they're not going to be the most boisterous people, maybe they're not going to be the people with like 1 trillion followers on Instagram, Twitter/X, but there are good, hardworking people out there that are going to notice, and if you just keep working, if you just stay upbeat, stay positive, even when things aren't going your way, and trust me, I've had some things not go my way in my personal life as well over the last 2 years. I'm not going to get into those on this podcast, but I'm sure that some of you might know what some of those are. Yep, certainly it's a case where you just have to keep on going. You just have to keep on putting in the work. And if you do so, things are going to turn out well for you. And hopefully this was a little bit encouraging. And if you have any other questions for me, as always, Twitter/X at @GN_D1. And the reasons why I say DMs does not matter is that they just get completely spammed. It's not that I don't look at them, but when I open up my Twitter/X DMs, it's like 30 women being like, hey, you're cute and everything like that. It's like, no, these are AI bots. They're not women that are actually thinking that I'm cute or anything like that. So because of all the spam bots, please do leave it in the form of a post/a comment, something like that. But always happy to be able to help you guys out. And hopefully this was just a nice, cheery story on this cheery holiday week. And coming up next, how about if we do talk a little bit of Big 12 conference play and so much more with Ryan McIntyre, the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, a part of the Beast Family Podcast.
Drafty windows? Sky-high energy bills? Tired of the hassle of constant repairs? This holiday season, Renewal by Andersen helps you slay the savings. Buy one window or door and get one 40% off. Plus, take $200 off your entire purchase with a minimum of 4. And with special financing available, replacing those old, inefficient windows has never been easier. Don't let drafty, worn-out windows crash your holiday cheer. Visit renewalbyandersen.com today to schedule your free consultation.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Ryan McIntyre aboard. He does such a great job over with the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, more specifically the college experience. He and Kobe Dan do an absolutely tremendous job looking at this great game of college basketball, and I know that we've been seeing a little bit more of their friend Noah on the show the last few days as well. They do such an amazing job looking at all these teams, from the biggest of the big to the smallest of the small. And you're able to follow Ryan on the old Twitter/X at Mac, spelled M-A-C. And additionally, he's doing a great job looking at bowl season as well. And Ryan, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always appreciate it. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays to you too, my friend. And, well, it has been a very, very happy start to the season if you're a fan of the Big 12. And just how do you take a look at this conference? Because certainly there are a few teams that are dragging the conference down. I'm looking at you, Utah. It's not been great for them. Maybe expected a little bit more out of Kansas State. But I just take a look at the top of the conference right now. And I really do think that those teams 1 through 5, 1 through 6, however you want to categorize it, they have the best top in all of college basketball.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it still is the top league in college basketball. I mean, that top tier of Arizona, Iowa State, Houston, Kansas, BYU, and Texas Tech is going to be a gauntlet here. It makes up over 1/3 of the league, and it's so hard to win on the road in the Big 12. It has been forever that way. And those teams up top are just so dominant defensively.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's going to be interesting because I think that it is neck and neck with them in the Big Ten. If you want to go top 3, I would have to give it to the Big Ten because when you've got Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, it's really hard to match a top 3, even even with what Arizona is doing, even with what BYU and Iowa State have done. But I do think that with regards to the Big 12, it's going to be interesting to see which of those mid-tier teams is really able to have a charge, because we've seen some inconsistency out of a team like a TCU where they very nearly knock off Michigan and they lose at home to New Orleans. A team like a Baylor have a few question marks on defense with them. Cincinnati's obviously been a little bit, shall we say, rough, and then your guys over there at West Virginia has been a little bit hit or miss for them as well.
In that middle tier, it's going to be who's going to rise out of this group and make it a 8-9 bid league. Baylor, I think, is probably going to find a way to get to the dance like they always do. I just think that we have such a track record with Scott Drew of winning games, especially in the Big 12. Jamie Dixon and TCU, you mentioned it, they've been up and down. They do have the bad bye game loss, but they're such a tough out at home in conference play year after year that I think they're going to find a way to grind it out and get to the dance. Can UCF, who's sitting at 11-1 right now with Johnny Dawkins, get to their first dance since joining the league? Oklahoma State as well, another 11-1 team with year 2 of Steve Lutz. And then Colorado, I think, sitting there at 10-2 as well. Tab Boyle, they've been able to avoid the bad losses as well.
Yep, they certainly have been able to. As Ryan McIntyre does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ryan, as we're doing this, we've got no games today, unfortunately. We've got no games the next few days. And we only have one on Saturday. That is going to be the most dead Saturday card I ever do in my life. Typically, we've got the Diamond Eye Classic to hold down the fort. Unfortunately, this year we do not. But once we get games back for the Big 12, most of these teams have one more bye game remaining. And how do you evaluate those sorts of games? Because typically, we have been in lockstep with this in terms of these games just before Christmas, just before New Year's, those last bye game or two, them being real sleepy spots for a lot of these power conference teams. But I don't know if you've noticed this, but it's felt like over the last few days, these teams that have actually had games where they've been big favorites, they've actually been absolutely stomping teams, and there have been a lot of favorites that have actually been able to cover those larger numbers.
They really have, which has kind of been surprising. But I'm in agreement with you that it's a great spot if you like some first half money lines. If you see a team that's coming off a huge win before the break and kind of feeling themselves going into it, and you think it's a sell high spot, I definitely like taking the points with some of these dogs, because this is going to be the most dead atmospheres you'll get all year. The game after Christmas, in between New Year's, with the holidays going on, the fans got a lot of different plans. Students aren't on campus, and then after the New Year, that's when those home courts really ramp up, and we get into that stretch run to March.
Oh, absolutely, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see, to say the least, and I do think that there are going to be some very interesting games as we're doing this. We don't have any numbers up, so hard to speculate there, though. We do have a number on that random CSUN versus Stanford game, but we don't have a lot to evaluate there. But how are you going to be looking to attack conference play? Because we do have a lot of, shall we say, hodgepodge teams. We've got some teams that have been hot and cold. Obviously, these powerful teams like Michigan, Iowa State, Arizona, they've been absolutely dominating teams, and I do think that it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how these teams, like, for example, in Iowa State or in Arizona, gets priced against, say, a West Virginia going on the road to Morgantown.
I agree with you, Greg. I usually like to sell on the teams that are undefeated, because I think that the break kind of can hurt their momentum of what they built. I think also everybody listening, take a note of these dominant teams in the non-con, because last 2 or 3 years, and this happened over time, the teams that have dominated the non-con and then maybe suffered a couple tough losses in league play with the gauntlet have come back and really been strong in March Madness. Last year, Florida ran the non-con table and then took a couple losses in conference play. Wasn't even the 1 seed in the SEC, but ultimately ended up winning the national championship that year. UConn won their first of 2 national championships, and I think, 2023? They did the exact same thing. They were undefeated in the non-con, dominant, then ultimately ended up going on like a 5-game losing streak before finding their dominance again in March. So I'm going to be looking at that. Vanderbilt's a team that's been very dominant, 12-0. Obviously, Iowa State, Arizona, Michigan all have run through the gauntlet as well. And you can even throw Nebraska in there sitting at 12-0.
Yep, absolutely. Nebraska has been one of the best surprise teams in all of college basketball. Seton Hall, certainly one of those teams that I've been taking note of as well. So there are some teams that are showing some dominance, and we're going to be interested to see how these teams are able to do moving forward. And out of these teams that maybe have come out of the woodwork, like Seton Hall and Nebraska that I was talking about a little bit before, do you think both of these teams or neither of these teams are real, and how are you going to be looking at them moving forward? Because I do think that they're two of the more fascinating teams in all of college basketball too, where they were picked towards the bottom of their conference, have really been able to rise up.
I definitely think that it's hard to argue Nebraska. I mean, that they're not for real because they have the longest win streak in America now at 16 after winning the crown to end the year. So the Mayor's doing a great job. They look in prime position to get to another dance here. Seton Hall definitely has been dominant on the defensive end once again. They're sitting at 11-1. Can they continue to dominate? This isn't the non-con now, but the year of 2025 before we flip the calendar to 26. As long as they can make some jump shots, they're pretty damn good.
Yeah, they certainly are, and I'm going to be very fascinated to see what we're going to be able to get out of those teams moving forward, as well as Ryan McIntyre, who does such great work over at the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Ryan, now we're a little bit more than a month and a half through the season, not quite 2 months, but is there something that you've had to do this year that has been a little bit of a change from past years? And is there something that has been popping up over the last few weeks that you feel like you might need to adjust to moving forward?
I think laying the points more so than in years past. Laying the points with bigger numbers. Teams like Michigan and Arizona that just seem to just steamroll teams. You throw Gonzaga in there and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's been laying some huge numbers and they just pull away from teams, and BYU as well. So I think that maybe it's more the 3-point variance is why we've been able to see some of these teams be able to cover these huge numbers. So I'm more likely to lay points in bigger numbers than I ever have in the past.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I actually had a conversation about this with one of our good friends in Rob Donaldson about a week or so ago, and I want to get your thoughts on this too. I was mentioning this with these volatile teams, like a Florida State who takes over 50% of their shots from three. You could throw in there a Cornell if you want to go to a little bit more of the mid-major ranks. How much do you think that perhaps in future years, and even just this year, it might be worth taking a look at some alternate lines with even a team like an Alabama, for example, where if they are hitting those threes, they could win by a big giant margin, and when they're not hitting those threes, well, they're going to come nowhere close to even covering that number.
Definitely. I agree with that logic there, Greg, just because, like you said, the variance is so high. Definitely take a peek. I like doing that in March, too. March Madness, that is, because I think we just see teams wear out, especially on that quick turn. You see a lot of blocks in the round of 32. So I've definitely been a fan of the alternate route, because it basically is like playing a dog on the other side.
Yep, absolutely. And I do have to wrap it up with this as well, because, well, we are in the Christmas spirit. Typically, we're wanting to talk about the good and what have you. But is there a team right now that you feel like you might be looking to fade moving forward? Is there a team that has been a little bit of a disappointment that you might be looking to go up against in the next few weeks?
That's a really good question. I know we just kind of crowned Nebraska, but I think that everybody will see that they're undefeated. But I think that the Big Ten is a little bit of a gauntlet here. So, I mean, take it on Sparty, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon to start. I think there should be some spots to fade Nebraska finally.
Yep, I do think that there might be as well. And a man that I never want to fade is you, because you, Ryan, are doing such an excellent job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love with college basketball. You're dialed in on a little bit of everything. So love to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
I appreciate it, Greg. Go check us out at The College Experience. My Twitter personal is at Moneyline_Mac. Merry Christmas, everybody, and have a great new year.
Absolutely. Ryan is doing such a great job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love, and every single time he joins me, he lends such great insight. So big thanks to Ryan for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you hear your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. I hope you're all having a great holiday season, a great Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever you're celebrating, as unfortunately we're not celebrating with any college basketball games the next few days, so that makes me a little bit sad, but I'm with you guys every single day, and once we get the games back, picks and analysis on every game, every day, so appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous, but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.